Yeah, it is on. Okay, how about that? It's a good thing I'm not doing a really highly technological kind of presentation. Oh, yes, I am. I don't even have any notes. This is here just to give me something to stand behind and look like I'm intelligent, and I can hide behind it maybe, something to hold up my Bible, and okay. See if I remember how to use this. All right. Our title, Proving God I Am or Not. And I'm aware that the title changes voices, and it's not exactly grammatically correct, but does it help? It helps the video. Okay, good deal. All right, so welcome. If you're watching the video later, I can't say good evening to you. I can say good evening to the folks in the room, but and I do hope that this video that we'll share it, and that we'll get some people to watch that wouldn't normally be able to watch. Proving God. This is going to be an apologetics series, and I kind of have a love and hate relationship with apologetics. I love the knowledge, I love learning, but I hate that it just kind of naturally becomes argumentative, doesn't it? And I don't like that part. See, it's relationships that opens the door to the heart. So you can see all these subjects there on the side, and I love all these subjects. When people come to my desk at work, and a lot of people will come to me for answers, and they don't get just the answer, they'll get some philosophy too, or I'll tell them mathematically why that works. You know, it's like I don't give just the answers. There's reasons, and so I like to do that. So I like all of these things, and there's been a lot of apologetic works. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of people so much smarter than I am who could be way more qualified. If it was a philosopher, they would go so deep into philosophy, and you would get wonderful, wonderful arguments, logics, physics, mathematics, all of the people who do this kind of work in their field, they're going to get so deep in their field that they lose a lot of people. Okay? And so my approach is going to be quite different. I'm not going to be deep in the woods in any of those things, but yet we're going to touch on all of them a little bit. Okay? So my approach will be quite a bit different, and like I said, it's a little bit more relational and just kind of eclectic. We're going to do a lot of different types of things. So these are the evidences that I'm going to talk about. You'll notice they're not all those other topics, but these are the ones that the areas of evidence that I'm going to show: the Word, the Bible, the nation of Israel. Einstein was asked once, "How would you prove if God was real?" And he would say, "The nation of Israel." We're going to look at creation, nature itself, and the resurrection. One reason I got started, 5 years ago, I think it was during COVID time, I watched a video, and in this video they were interviewing people on the topic of faith and reason, faith and logic and science, and by and large, the people were answering, well, faith is obsolete. This is an age of scientific enlightenment, and no one lives by blind faith anymore. That's just for an uneducated and ignorant people in ancient times. And this video kind of offended me. I didn't like it. I want to say faith and reason do go together. They do. Blind faith isn't ignorant. It doesn't need to be. So faith and reason do go together. And like I said, I wanted to show that video, but I couldn't find it anywhere. It's been a long time ago, so I don't know what happened to it. But faith and reason do go together, and I just want to be able to present that in a way that the average person can kind of understand. Because if God is God, he's not afraid of science. Not at all. He's not at odds with it. Pure science will always point to God. It has to. How can I say that? Well, pure science, the observation and study of this world, so it will very naturally point you to its origin. Pure science just takes and learns, and the evidence leads you to whatever it leads you to. You don't have any predetermined path. And so if God be God and he created the world, creation is going to point itself back to the Creator. His fingerprints will be everywhere, right? The other kind of science, applied science, you begin with a problem. You have a specific problem that you want to solve, and so you theorize what the problem is. You make a hypothesis, and then often, you're the one who's made that hypothesis, so you really want to try hard to prove yourself right. So it just kind of corrupts that path to discovery. But pure science will always point to God. And so reason is not the enemy of faith, nor is pure science the enemy of God, any more than a mechanic has reason to be the enemy of Henry Ford. And if my brother-in-law were here, I'm sure he'd had some comments about mechanics and that statement. Anyway, so back to proving God, and it's really important for us to evaluate this, to decide this. I can't remember what's next. Okay, you may have heard of Pascal's wager before, and it's best summarized by this: you can't afford to be wrong. Because the gamble is this: if you gamble your life on that God is real, and so you decide, I'm going to live by this book because God is real, does it really cost you? Nothing. You're going to live a good life. You're going to live a good moral life. Maybe there'll be some things you would have done differently had you not decided to live that way. But you're going to live a good life. There's a lot of wisdom in here. It's not really going to cost you anything. And in fact, those things that you might have done, living selfishly doesn't bring happiness. If you make the wager, God is real and I'm going to live by this, it doesn't cost you anything, right? On the other hand, this is Pascal's wager, if you're mistaken, if you wager God is not real and you don't live by God's way, you've condemned yourself to an eternal separation from God. It's cost you everything. Thomas Hobbes said, hell is truth seen too late. That's quite a statement, isn't it? Now, I do need to take a little aside here, okay? Many of you know I love the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes. Bill Watterson wrote that. Thomas Hobbes was one of his heroes, and John Calvin was another. So if you ever drive up behind a car and you see the window decal of a little boy that looks like Calvin peeing on something, that is not Bill Watterson's Calvin, okay? He just didn't sue the people that did that. I kind of wish he would have, but not so that he could make money, just so they would stop doing it. Okay, so hell is truth seen too late, okay? All right, I like what C.S. Lewis says a whole lot here. Christianity, if false, is of no importance. If true, of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. Makes really good sense, right? Okay, so this is important. If you are out there and undecided, listening to this video at some point, and you're undecided, is God real? And how can these Christians be so sure God is real? Well, stay tuned in, because this is really important to decide. Eternity is on the balance. That's not overstating it, okay? It's important to weigh this out. God is real or he is not. He is who he says he is or not. He says, I am. That's the name he gives himself. So I am or not, when we need to decide. Okay, so I want to make my opening statements. And I thought you've been making your opening statements. So far, I've just pretty much told you why we're doing this. So we're gonna talk a little bit. And the way I want to talk about this is the method I'm going to use to kind of make my opening statements. I just want to talk about this picture. I'm kind of proud of it. And you've heard me speak enough to know that just finding the right image some kind of inspires me. So this has inspired me. But what I want to talk about first is I am. And it, as I said, that's the name that God gave himself. But you know where that came from. Moses is being ready to be sent out to lead God's people out of slavery in Egypt, right? And God asked, when I get down there, they're going to ask, who sent you? That's a reasonable question. And God says, I am that I am. Tell them I am has sent you. Now, the reason that was a reasonable question, remember they have been in Egypt for 400 years, right? God spoke to Abraham, God spoke to Isaac, and God spoke to Jacob. They ended up in Egypt. Joseph went on before, that's a different story. But we know that God spoke to Joseph as well. But then for 400 years they're in slavery. We have no record that God spoke to anybody. They knew the stories. They knew the stories. Because it sounds like the mic's cutting out. But so they knew the stories, but they really didn't know God. They were more familiar with the gods of Egypt than they were with God. Which is why, the 10 plagues, we know that God conquered all the gods of Egypt. It really wasn't for the Egyptians' sakes, it was for the Israelites' sake, to help separate them from the gods of Egypt. But so when Moses gets down there, and they haven't known God or heard from God for 400 years, all they know is the stories. And Moses gets down there, and what he can say is, this is what God told me to tell you. I exist, and I've heard your prayers. Because that Hebrew word that we translate and get I am can also just as easily be translated I exist. So the message he sent through Moses was, I'm still here, I exist, and I've heard your prayers. So that's not lost on me. I am or not. That's why I chose that for the subtitle there. What's next? Okay, well, that's what I wanted to do, talk about I am, and I did that. So, okay, just in case, and as I start to begin to go through some proving God, I'm going to talk about proving now. I just want you to know, just in case you're worried that the amount of evidence and proof for God gets so overwhelming, it's like, I'm going to believe. I just have to believe. Don't worry, faith is always still required, okay? Okay, faith and reason go together, but faith is always required. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. In fact, the longer I walk with the Lord, it almost seems like my need for faith just keeps getting bigger instead of smaller. Really. Now, I don't need faith to believe that he's there. That faith, that's settled. Anyway, moving on. Faith will always be required. That's that. If we talk about evidence for God, don't worry. Faith will always be required. Also, I want to say right up from the front, there is no absolute proof. But I do believe there's evidence enough that placing your faith in God is just a reasonable choice. All right? No absolute proof. But can anything be absolutely proven? I read an article, a scientific article, just on this subject. And I was amazed at the number of things that scientists say really can't be absolutely proven. It was really pretty astonishing to me. But here's an interesting thing. They say that now knowledge is doubling every 12 hours. So if I say something really, really intelligent, and you listen really, really closely for the next 2 minutes, we'll all be dumber before I finish. Now, I referenced this in a sermon I preached. I had to look it up because I knew I'd referenced this before. 3 years ago, I made the statement that knowledge is doubling every 3 months. So in 3 months' time, we've gone from doubling, or in 3 years' time, we've gone from doubling every 3 months to now every 12 hours. That's just astounding and it's ridiculous. And yet, we don't know anything more than we did. Truth is more elusive than ever. The Bible speaks of that, ever learning and never coming to the knowledge of the truth. So, it's weird, but in our age of enlightenment, aren't we smart? In our age of enlightenment and superior knowledge, shouldn't we be certain of so much more? Flat around. Can you believe that this has made a lot of traction in the last, 5 years or so? It really has. Strange. How has it made so much? 3%, as much as 3% of the population believes this. How? Information, this cuts in and out a little bit, but information is so available, and there's so much. Maybe it's not all true, but there's a lot of information available, and it just makes it easier to fool people and to not be able to process everything and know everything. So in our age of enlightenment, we're not as really, truly enlightened maybe as we think. And by the way, just in case you want to prove this to know for sure, you can buy a ticket on SpaceX, and you can fly a mission to the International Space Station. It'll only cost you $55 million. But you can get up there and you can look out the window. Now, it doesn't orbit high enough that you see the little blueberry on the right, but you're still far enough away that you can see what's going on. But anyway, it's astounding to me. But whoever did the little diagram of the disk-like Earth, it actually, you can see it kind of. Anyway. I'm not mathematically smart enough to prove how orbits work. I can't calculate that. But you don't have to be very smart to know that you can spin a basketball. Some people can spin a basketball on their finger for hours. Literally. Why? Because the center of gravity is perfect. How long could you spin a frisbee on your finger? Okay, enough. All right. So just because we have so much information available to us does not mean that we're wiser, okay? All right. Okay, so back to proving God. I want to make some statements, some quotes that I found about proof and absolute proof. You may have heard this before. Nothing is quite true, and even this is not quite true. I've heard that saying before. I didn't know who said it. Multatuli. That's a pen name for this Edward Double D. If I say it like that, it sounds like I know who I'm talking about. I'm not real sure. He was an author, I know that. I do know who Carl Jung is, and he said no scientific statement is final. And that's true. That's true. Even Einstein, I read about him when he was getting ready to present his, I think probably the theory of relativity, but he has a lot of theories. It may not have been that one. And he was nervous. He said, tomorrow I'll either be a fool or I'll be a genius, you know. And he understood that eventually better science will come. Every theory is, you know, we'll learn more, and it will be outdated at some point, but, you know, he knows that his theories, even if they're accepted, they won't last forever. No scientific statement is final. You may have heard this before. Evolution is unproved and improvable. We believe it only because the alternative is special creation, and that is unthinkable. If you Google that, it will probably come up with the name Arthur Keith. He may have said it sometime, but they have no record of him actually writing it, just to be fair. But evolution is unproved. That's just a statement of fact. It's not proved, and it's improvable. But so are a lot of things improvable, right? But that's not the attitude of all scientists by far. But there is kind of a prevailing attitude that we want to believe anything other than intelligent design. Yeah. And there is a lot of that. Okay, a little fun with proof. Of these four things, how many of them do you think can be proven? Any takers? None of them. No, wait. That says motion. Those are laws, right? They can prove them, right? Actually, scientists know, they say they can't absolutely be proven, which is kind of astonishing to me, because when I was in physics class, I learned them as laws. And by the way, I won an award in physics, just to let you know. Why are you laughing? The teacher handed out awards to all the students. You know, one person might get the first law of thermodynamics, another one might get, well, I got the entropy award, the law of entropy award. And Brother Tony's smiling, he might know what that means. But yeah, the law of entropy is that everything is at an ever increasingly greater state of disarray. So it was not exactly a compliment, okay? Not exactly a compliment. Thank you, Mr. Searing, and you might watch this later because he is one of my friends on Facebook. But so Newton's laws, I learned those as physical laws. It's weird to me that they can't prove them. But here's the deal, or a thought anyway. The laws of motion, they make particle accelerators that use electromagnets to hurl electrons faster and faster and faster, and they are approaching the speed of light. If they break the speed of light, can we expect the laws of motion to behave the same way? I don't know. Okay, the value of pi, can that be proven? No, it's an irrational number, right? Those decimal points go on and on and on and on forever. It can't be proven. 4,000 years ago, they said the value of pi was 3. One diameter can go around the circle 3 times, and that's pretty close. I like to research things, but I found out there are papyruses in Egypt that date back to 1600 BC, which is about the same time that Moses was being sent to Egypt. And they had calculated pi to be 3.1605, which is pretty close. It's a good thing they built pyramids and not the St. Louis Arch. That might have been. Okay, but the value of pi can't be proven. It's an irrational number. even though they do get out to hundreds of decimal points now. Triangulation theory, and I'm not talking about the cop shows where they have cell phone towers and triangulate where people are. I'm talking about in our addition over here, what's holding up the roof? Trusses. Those are triangles. For a truss to work, it has to be triangulated. But the theory of triangulation has never been proven. They can't prove it. The math works, they can calculate it, they can tell you how much that truss carries, and if you change this or that, they can calculate all that stuff, but they can't prove it. Airfoil lift. Airplanes fly. They do. No one doubts that. You get on an airplane and you're confident it's going to take off. It's amazing that it does sometimes, but and you're thankful when it lands still. But they can't prove it. So none of these things can be proven, and yet we trust our lives with these things. We do. We trust our lives with these things. But here's the thing. Absolute proof. But the mind will only believe what the heart will allow. Oh no, we live in a sophisticated age. Our brilliant minds tell us what we're going to believe. Do you really believe that? No, our heart, the mind will only believe what the heart will allow. And the heart changes sometimes slower. But once the heart will allow it, the mind can change pretty quickly. Okay. I like this quote. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, and the other is to refuse to believe what is true. This was an author. I don't know who. Is he Dutch? I forgot. Okay, I want to suggest something. I want to suggest that we flip this script. If you're watching, if you're undecided, is God real or not? I want to suggest we flip this script. Why is the burden of proof on the Christian to prove that God exists? Given what we've reviewed, remember Pascal's wager? That's what's at stake. Given what is at stake and the lack of absolute proof of anything, shouldn't the burden of proof be on science to prove that God does not exist? Not the other way around? Applied science will always tell you faith is for the uneducated. The Christian cannot prove that God exists, so why should you devalue your intellect by placing faith in something that can't be seen and can't be proven? And stop asking the silly questions. Science has all the answers, as long as you don't ask the silly questions. So I need to stop and tell you about this debate I watched between John Lennox and Peter Atkins. Atkins is a scientist who's an atheist. John Lennox is a mathematician, a Christian mathematician. If you caught that, you might think, well, Lennox might be at a disadvantage talking about a subject like science, because the name of this debate, or the topic of the debate was, does science have all the answers? So the mathematician was debating the scientist. But Atkins' basic position was that science can have all the answers. Maybe we don't have them all yet, but science can have all the answers. Well, as long as you don't ask the silly questions. And that was his word, silly questions. I think he wanted to say something else, but he left it silly. And John Lennox's response was, well, but aren't those silly questions some of the most important questions? The silly questions you're referring to are like, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? What purpose is there in all this? Those questions really aren't silly. Aren't they the most important ones? And science can't answer those questions. They can't, not at all. But how sad if your worldview doesn't allow you to have purpose or doesn't allow you to explore those meanings of life. And meaning of life. I believe, I can't prove this because I haven't lived forever and I haven't lived all over, but I believe every culture, in every age, in every continent, it's just part of us to ask, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? And science, of course, will have no answer for that. The Bible actually does. The Bible says that God put eternity in the heart of man. It's coded into us. Okay, so it is true. No one can offer absolute proof that God exists. But there are mountains of evidence, which we'll begin to look at, mountains of evidence that point to his existence. But there's not one shred of evidence that proves that he does not exist, other than you can't see him. Lots of things that we believe that we can't see. And the Bible knows that you can't. I mean, the Bible says this: no one has ever seen God. The one and only Son, the one who is at the Father's side, he has seen him and he has revealed him. And I love John when he writes, what we have seen, what we have heard, what we've beheld and our hands handled concerning the word of life. I love John. Okay. Oh, that was a different verse. Oh, yeah. Okay, anyway. So also remember what Jesus told Thomas. I know that we all remember, but Thomas, one of the disciples of Jesus, was not with the disciples when Jesus revealed himself to all of them. And when they told him later, he says, I'm not going to believe until I can touch the wounds and see him with my own eyes. So when Jesus appears to Thomas, he says, Thomas, put your finger here. Put your finger here. And Thomas just falls to his knees and says, my Lord, my God. And Jesus tells him, you've seen and you believe. Blessings to you, Thomas. For you've seen and you believe. But blessings upon those who have never seen and will never get to see, but yet believe. So, if God exists, and he does, but if God exists, there are answers to all of those silly questions that science can't answer. You know, the whys and the what is the purpose, what is the meaning of life. Also in that debate, Atkins accused Christians of using God as their kind of magic box answer to all the unanswerable questions. Anything that science can't explain is like, well, God does, that's God. He just does that. Well, fair enough. But science has done the same thing at times. You ever heard of God particles, God of the gaps? I'm not going to talk about those right now. Maybe never. But science has a magic box answer also: time. Well, that's unreasonable for that to happen. Well, of course it is, but it took billions and billions of years and then it happened. Well, how do you argue against billions and billions of years? Right? I mean, if I'm lucky, I'll live to be 85. I don't know. So how do I argue against billions and billions of years? Oh, I think I need to go one more click. So I have a problem with the billions and billions of years and always using time for your magic. You run out of time at the jumps. Too many things have to happen all at once, and you no longer have billions and billions of years to wait for the next happy accident. Okay, so if we're going to have random life, not intelligent design life, random life, we just have matter and energy, and it just kind of happens. The first magic jump that has to happen is that spark of life, right? Is that impossible? If you have billions and billions of years to wait for it to happen? Well, I don't. Let's just say that it is. Let's just say that that lightning strike somehow just hits the right elements and the right conditions, and there's that spark of light. Well, first of all, it reminds me of the joke, though, the scientist that tells God, you know, I can create life, and God says, well, that's wonderful. Let me see. You know, I'd like to see what you can do. And so, I'm going to create life from this dirt. And he bends down to pick up the dirt, and then God says, oh, wait a minute. When I did it, I created my own dirt. So you go create your own dirt, okay? So, but let's just say that the matter is there, and the lightning hits at the right time, and these elements all come together, the right pressure, all the conditions. It took billions and billions of years, so we were patient for this, and it finally happens, and you get that spark of life. And it's a single-cell organism. You have to start simple. So you've got a single-cell organism, and then you tell it, okay, now you've got to, you can't sustain on this energy forever. Now you have to get nutrients from your environment. Okay, well, let's just say somehow that spark of life also got a digestive system or some way for it to get nutrients from its surroundings. Okay, now you tell this little spark of life, this little single-cell organism, now you have to propagate the species. And it says, time out, what's a species? I'm just one. Well, you have to divide yourself so that there can be more of you and you can grow. Well, divide myself? You mean like split myself in two? It's like, no, this is survival of the fittest, baby. I'm not doing that. That sounds bad for my health, right? Okay, you see how we no longer have millions of years for this to happen. We've run out of time. This little thing is only going to live so long. It's a lot of accidents that have to happen all at once. Now, what if we progress to the next level where now we have, instead of asexual reproduction, you have bisexual, and now you need both a male and a female type where they're going to split their DNA. And I didn't know the part, but DNA, so how does that happen? We'll talk more about that in another session. But now you're going to have two that have to split their DNA and somehow combine them together. This sounds like a whole lot more of those happy accidents that have to happen all at once, and we don't have billions of years to wait. So anyway, time can't be the magic box. I don't understand that because you run out of time. I put my faith in a God that I cannot see, but I have enough faith for the happy accidents that have to happen. Okay, so let's get to the real root of the matter. As I mentioned before, the mind will only believe what the heart will allow. And I'm convinced that the real reason people struggle to put their faith in God it has nothing to do with if it's reasonable or not, nothing to do with whether intelligent design is more plausible than the evolution theory or the Big Bang or any of that. It's much more personable than that. Hurt, disappointment, and mostly when other Christians have caused the hurt. You know, we all have hurt, and it's like, and it's when we experience hurt and we're at the same time being asked to put our faith in a God that we can't see, and He's allowed us to be hurt. It's troubling. I don't understand. If God is real, why did He let this happen to me? And those are hard questions to answer. They're not real easy to answer, but there are answers. Not found in science, but there are answers. And sometimes you have to separate. If another person has hurt you and that person was a Christian, they're not perfect, and that's not God's fault is what I'm saying. But another thing that keeps people from coming to God is pride. Pride. Not the Charlie Pride kind, where you kiss an angel good morning. Charlie Pride, the singer. Okay. All right. The Frank Sinatra kind of pride that I did it my way. And that's really been the whole argument since the Garden of Eden. Why do you want to obey a God who just tyrannically tells you what to do? This is what you can do and this is what you can't. Don't you want to be like God and make your own rules, make your own way? Well, that appeals to something within us that keeps a lot of people from God too. So hurt and disappointment and feeling like others have let you down, then by extension that God has let you down, these things and pride keep people from really putting their faith in God. But I've heard this, I don't even know where I first heard it. The closer people get to death, the more religious they become. And it's true. And faith is a lot more appealing when you're in a situation like that. I actually love to be on an airplane when there's turbulence. Now, a little bit of turbulence is fine. Everybody's okay. But if every now and then you get in a pocket where the plane is you just feel like those wings are going to come off. I know it. And the tension in the cabin changes because everybody knows this is more than normal. I don't like it. I like to be there and I like to look around. I like to see who's praying that's never prayed before. Because there will be somebody praying that's never prayed before. The closer you get to death, the more religious people become. It's just true. So, you want proof that God is real? Go to 100 funerals. Serious. You'll see quite a range of experiences, but mostly you're going to see 3 categories. I don't think I've been to 100 funerals, but I've been to enough. You'll see these 3 categories. You'll see where it's the weeping, it's just all is lost. The loved one is gone and gone forever, and the people who are reacting at the funeral like this are devoid of all faith. There's just no hope. I love this person and they're gone. There's another group. Oh, they're in a better place. And then they start evaluating the deceased spiritual scorecard. Well, Uncle Joe was so good. He helped everyone. If there's anybody who deserves to get in God's heaven, I know God will let Uncle Joe in because he was so good. There is no spiritual scorecard. There's not. Remember what C.S. Lewis said? If God is real, if Christianity is real, you need to pay attention to what it says because this says there is no spiritual scorecard. You will not be good enough to go to heaven. We are very blessed in this church. We have wonderful elders and their wives, and their integrity is incredible. None of them are good enough to go to church or go to heaven. And I'm not putting them down because every one of them, I'm looking and they're all nodding their heads. They're not good enough to go to heaven. None of us are. And you never will be. There's no spiritual scorecard that's going to help you out. You know what Jesus said to these people who have this kind of nominal and generic faith? He said, "Depart from me. I never knew you." Now go to the funeral of those who did know Jesus, who knew God, and you know they knew Jesus. There was something different about them. And when you go to that funeral, what is it? It's a celebration of life. They understand that song, Blessed Assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. Who are these people? Are they lunatics? Why can a group of people have that kind of confidence? It's not hope. It's blessed assurance. How can there be a group of people who have this kind of peace at a moment like that? And it only comes from God. It only comes from the spiritual world. Science can study the natural world. Well, I'll go to the next. Science does a wonderful job of observing and studying the natural world and the laws that govern it. But there's a whole nother world, that spiritual world. And observational, empirical evidence, well, how do you see the spiritual world? You have to have a different evaluation for proof, right? So there is a whole nother world, a spiritual one. It's not Mother Nature. You can see I say crystals and diamonds. Did you know they can make diamonds now? See, before we always thought it took, what? Billions and billions of years to make diamonds? And now, they can make it in 15 minutes. They can make you one while you wait. Now, they have a couple of methods. That fast method, it's as quick as 15 minutes. They have another method, I don't remember, I didn't research that deeply, I don't care to know that much. But there's another, I think it takes 2 to 3 months to make a diamond, and that character is so much, I don't know if a normal jeweler can tell the difference. It's not cubic zirconium, it's a diamond, it's just a synthetic diamond. One time, things that we used to think took billions and billions of years or millions and millions of years, they don't anymore. So they can make diamonds now. You don't have to go to Arkansas to find them. They can make diamonds now. And they can probably make crystals too. They probably don't, but they probably could. But neither crystals or diamonds inherently have any power or any worth. Some people like to put crystals in their home. That's fine. They're pretty. They reflect light and they're pretty. But, diamonds, crystals, they're pretty. They have no inherent worth or power. But I just want to leave you with this. If your God teeters on the tabletop when you bump the table, don't worship it. It doesn't deserve to be worshiped. And you should be able to ask the silly. You should be able to ask those questions, the questions of why and the purpose, the ones that science won't have answers for, but the Word of God does. Okay, so those were my opening statements for proving God. And next week we'll pick up, we'll talk about the Bible. I love to talk about the story of the Bible. Only God could write the Bible. That's my subtitle. And after that, we'll talk about the nation of Israel and creation and the resurrection. And this is the point where you could take a picture of that. You already did it. All right. You did it when I wasn't looking. Anyway, so that was our first night of proving God, I am or not. Hopefully the title makes a little more sense now after some of that explanation. But anyway, well, thank you, and thank you for watching.